Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a really big question, one that sits right at the heart of one of the world's oldest faiths, and we're going to explore it through the lens of a super fascinating philosophical text.
So here's the question. Is Judaism a religion just for one nation, or is it meant for all of humanity? Now, according to the author we're looking at today, most of the usual answers, well, they're kind of looking in the wrong spot. To get to the real answer, we've got to dig a lot deeper.
All right, Section 1, a national or universal faith. And right off the bat, the author makes it clear this isn't just some dry historical debate. No, this is a question about the very soul of the religion, about its place in the entire world.
And the core argument here is that to get to the bottom of this, we need to kind of press pause on the history and the law, just for a minute. Instead, we need to focus on one single thing, the concept of God itself. You know, what kind of God does Judaism actually talk about? And is that an idea that could resonate with everyone everywhere?
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the Great Religious Divide. Now, to really get what's at stake here, the author lays out this really big idea that pretty much all of spiritual history can be seen as this epic clash between two powerful, totally opposing worldviews. And they argue any faith that wants to be truly universal, well, it has to find a way to bring these two ideas together.
So the first of these worldviews is what the author calls Semitic monotheism. This is the idea of a God who is completely transcendent. Think of it this way. He's totally outside and above the world. He's the creator, sure, but he is fundamentally separate from everything he created.
And on the other side of the ring, you have what the author terms Aryan emanation. Now, it is really important to be clear here. The author is using Aryan in a very specific, much older philosophical and linguistic way, not in the toxic racial sense it took on in the 20th century. For them, it's all about the idea that the divine flows out from God. It emanates, making the divine present within creation itself, not separate from it. And this really gets to the heart of the tension, doesn't it? Is God a creator who's separate and transcendent, or is God an immanent force that's actually a part of our world? For centuries, these two ideas looked totally, completely incompatible. It felt like a religion had to choose one or the other. You had to pick a side.
Which brings us to Section 3, Judaism's mystical key. So, which side does Judaism fall on? Well, the author's answer is pretty surprising. They say, neither. They argue that the solution, the way to bridge this huge gap, has actually been there the whole time, just kind of hidden away inside a mystical tradition.
See, the text makes this point that if you only read the Bible or the rabbinic legal codes, you're absolutely missing half the picture. Yeah, those sources definitely put a huge emphasis on the transcendent God, the creator who is separate, but that, the author says, is only one side of the coin.
The real key, according to this argument, is found in a whole other dimension of the faith, a mystical one. It's what the author calls Judaism's highest theological expression. Its ultimate achievement, really. And that mystical tradition is the Kabbalah. And this, right here, this is the absolute core of the whole argument. The idea is that Kabbalah reveals that Judaism was never meant to be just one thing or the other. It was always, from the beginning, striving to be both.
This is what the author calls a complete Judaism. You need all three of its pillars working together. You've got the written law, the oral tradition, and the Kabbalah. And the argument is that it's only when you look at all three of them together that the real synthesis emerges. You get this amazing picture of a God who is somehow both totally separate from us and at the same time an intimate part of us.
So let's get into Section 4, Bridging Two Worlds. How does this mystical synthesis actually work? I mean, how can God be both outside the world and inside it? It sounds like a paradox, right? Well, the author points to a fascinating clue, one that's been hiding in plain sight in the very first words of the Bible.
Okay, so let's look at the Hebrew word for create, which is bara. The author points out that if you listen to the mystical commentators, this word doesn't just mean to make something out of nothing. It also carries this other meaning, to cut or to separate. And that changes everything. It implies that the world wasn't just made from nothing, but was actually drawn out of God's own divine essence.
And suddenly, all the pieces just click into place. You start with that transcendent, unique creator, sure, but then you realize that God's breath of life is also an immanent presence inside of everything. So what's the bridge? It's emanation, the idea that the world flows from the divine. You see, it's not a contradiction after all. It's a process.
Now here's something really crucial. The author argues that this amazing synthesis didn't just happen in a vacuum. Not at all. In fact, they say Judaism was actively absorbing ideas from other cultures all along, using them to build this really unique picture of the divine.
I mean, think about it. The text argues that the time in Egypt was a chance to gather sparks of truth from a different civilization. Moses himself took some pretty foundational advice from his father-in-law, Jethro, who wasn't even an Israelite. And then you have this constant stream of converts throughout history, bringing in new blood and new ideas that just kept enriching the faith.
All right, Section 5, A Religion for the Future. So where does this all lead? This incredible, complex synthesis of transcendence and immanence, built up over centuries. Well, it leads the author to their final, and I have to say, pretty daring conclusion.
The ultimate takeaway is this. Because this complete form of Judaism manages to harmonize these two great spiritual tendencies of humanity, it actually holds the potential to become a truly universal faith. It offers a framework where that deep human desire for a personal, transcendent God can exist right alongside the longing for an immanent, unified divine presence. You don't have to choose.
It's a really provocative thought, isn't it? That by looking deep into its own mystical core, an ancient faith can be completely reframed as a potential blueprint for the future. And it leaves us with this fascinating question to ponder. What other hidden truths might be waiting inside the world's great wisdom traditions, just sitting there, ready for us to rediscover them?